Hello everyone, my name is Zenitsu and I'm back with another Digimon deck profile video. So today I'm going to be taking a look at BT9, and BT9 offers us lots of new and powerful tools to build and iterate on some new and existing decks. And today's deck I'm going to be taking a look at is going to be a new iteration of the UlforceVeedramon deck. So this version of UlforceVeedramon I'm going to be focused on is going to be the BT2 version, just because we have lots of really solid tamers that want to suspend themselves, so that way Ulforce can use his ability to unsuspend himself, so we can make as many attacks as we can possibly make based on how many tamers that we have in play. And what's added into BT9 that's making this deck more powerful than ever before is the fact that we do have some Jellymons to be playing around with to easily reallocate to the inheritable abilities that we want on our UlforceVeedramon to make him as strong as we possibly can. So without further ado, onto the actual deck profile. Starting off with the Digitama, I'm going to be running only 4 copies of Upamon. So Upamon is the only Digitama we really need, but it doesn't necessarily matter because we're an OTK style of deck. So if you want to run any Digitama that you feel like best fits, then you can. I just like Upamon for the consistency factor on having a nice draw engine on our Digitama in case we actually do need to move a Digimon out of our raising to try to get some extra card draw in to help build our perfect stack with our next incoming Digitama. And Upamon's condition is still really easy at helping us draw cards, where when attacking once per turn, if your opponent has a Digimon with no Digivolution sources in it in play, then we get to draw 1 card. But again, this could really be any Digitama you feel like you want to use, just because our Digitama slot is probably the most flexible based on what you're trying to gain out of your cards and the deck. Next, on to the rookies, I'm going to be running 4 copies of Strabimon. So this is the BT4 version of Strabimon, and we're utilizing this card mostly to try to dig out our tamers. So he has the nice on-play ability where we get to reveal the top 3 cards of our deck and add 1 Digimon with hybrid in its forms and 1 blue tamer from among them into our hand, and then the rest go to the bottom. So this has the upside of also being able to look for our hybrids, which we are running just a tiny bit of hybrids acting as an alternate win condition. But if you really wanted to, you could just as easily run the promo Gabumon that's also looking for the tamers, and he has the ability to look through the top 5 versus the top 3 with the Strabimon. But the whole goal and point of the card is just to try to find our tamers, so that way we could set them up as easily as we possibly can, and as quickly as we possibly can. Next, I'm going to be running 2 copies of Jellymon. So this is the BT9 version of Jellymon, and we're utilizing this card, well, yes, because it's a Jellymon, for our Kyoshiro to take advantage of, but this card it still does have its own upsides. So during your turn, once per turn, when you play a blue tamer, then we get to draw 1 card, adding to the overall consistency of the deck, just because we could sit on this Jellymon and start drawing every time we're playing our tamer. Then it has a nice inheritable on top of that to add some extra control into the deck, where during your turn, once per turn, when an effect would add a card into your hand, so literally just you using your effects to draw cards, then you get to return one of the opponent's level 3 Digimon back to their hand for some easy control for us literally just drawing cards, which is what blue generally likes doing anyway. Next, I'm going to be running 4 copies of Jellymon. So this is the promo version of Jellymon, and yes, we're using this mostly just because it's another Jellymon by name for one of our tamers to take advantage of, but on top of that, she also has a nice inheritable ability that helps us draw cards. So when we attack once per turn, if we have a Kyoshiro in play, then we get to draw 1 card, trying to, again, try to find our parts and pieces to make our deck as consistent as we possibly can. And speaking of even more card draw, the last rookie of the deck is going to be 4 copies of Veemon. So this is the UlforceVeedramon starter deck version of Veemon, and we're using this card because he also has the warp potential to make playing our Ulforce even easier, where during your turn, if your opponent has a level 6 or higher Digimon in play, then we get to Digivolve this Digimon into an UlforceVeedramon from our hand by paying 4 and ignoring its Digivolution requirements. So going from literally rookie to mega to be able to swing and to try to deal a lot of damage onto the opponent is really, really powerful, especially since we're blue and we have lots of ways to easily gain memory, so it's not like paying 4 is that big of a deal. Then on top of that, he has a nice when attacking ability for us to take advantage of for even more consistency in card draw, where when attacking, not limited to once per turn, if you have 7 or fewer cards in your hand, then we get to draw 1 card for some more good card draw. Next, on to the champions, I'm going to be running 2 copies of Gorillamon. So Gorillamon is in the deck just because he evos for 1, and he has 6000 DP in case we need to be aggressive with him, and that's all we're trying to do is use him as a good stepping stone to climb our stages into our higher level Digimon as quickly and efficiently as we possibly can. Next, I'm going to be running 2 copies of Veedramon. So this is the BT1 secret rare version of Veedramon, and this is a really good card to aggro with early on, just because he has a nice when attacking ability where if we have a blue tamer in play, then we get to unsuspend this Digimon, so it allows us to easily chip at the opponent's security for multiple attacks on as early as a level 4 body. Then he has a nice inheritable ability for our higher level Digimon to use, where during all turns, while you have a blue tamer in play, then this Digimon gains plus 1000 DP, so it's just making our higher level Digimon a little bit stronger. Next, I'm going to be running 4 copies of Coelamon. So Coelamon is in the deck for a very similar reason that we want with Gorillamon, where we're just utilizing him because he evos for 1, so we could use him to climb our stages as quickly and efficiently as we possibly can, but if we do just need to try to sit on the card, he does have the blocker ability to act as some defense. And then the last champion of the deck is going to be 2 copies of Kumamon to, again, act as an alternate win condition for the deck, just because if we break all of the opponent's security and we have memory left over, then we could use our Tamer that can't suspend to Digivolve into Kumamon and swing for the game that way. So if you wanted to, you could swap this out for any other blue hybrid. It doesn't really matter, it's just the hybrid factor that we're trying to take advantage of. Next, on to the ultimates, I'm going to be running 2 copies of Weregarurumon. So Weregarurumon is pretty good, not necessarily for his multi-attacking ability because we're not playing any Garurumons for him to use, but we're using him mostly because of the consistency in his inheritable ability, where during your turn, while we have 8 or more cards in our hand, which is not hard to do with all of the amount of card draw that we have in the deck, then this Digimon gains Security Attack Plus, so our UlforceVeedramon can hit as hard as he possibly can. And then the last level 5 of the deck is going to be 4 copies of Arrow Veedramon from the UlforceVeedramon starter deck, just because we want, again, that consistency in that inheritable ability, where during your turn, while we have 8 or more cards in our hand, then this Digimon gains Security Attack Plus, again, all for our UlforceVeedramon to punch as hard as he possibly can, but this is still a pretty decent card to aggro with in case we need him to, because he natively has the jamming ability himself, so we could use him to help chip at the opponent to be able to line up the proper amount of attacks to form lethal with our UlforceVeedramon. And speaking of our UlforceVeedramon, next onto the Megas, I'm going to be running 4 copies of UlforceVeedramon as the only level 6 that we need. So what's making this card so good is his ability where during your turn, not limited to once per turn, when one of your blue Tamers becomes suspended, then we get to unsuspend this Digimon. So a lot of our Tamers do suspend themselves to be able to use this card to be able to swing at the opponent multiple times in a single turn, to be able to hit the opponent's security and hopefully line up enough attacks to be able to close out the game with just this card alone and the amount of Tamers we could have in play. Then on top of that, he has a secondary ability where during your turn once per turn, when this Digimon becomes unsuspended during your main phase, then we get to gain 1 memory, so that way we have some extra resource generation to be able to either line up our hybrid plays or go into our Omnimon to close out the game with. And speaking of our Omnimons, the last Digimon of the deck and only level 7 of the deck is going to be 2 copies of Omnimon. So this is the BT5 version of Omnimon, and we're just using this card, again, as an alternative win condition in case we don't have enough Tamers in play, and we just barely had enough attacks to break all of the opponent's security. Then we just use his Wind Digivolving ability to unsuspend himself, and his second Wind Digivolving ability of Blitz to be able to attack even when the memory passes on to the opponent. Next, onto the options, I'm going to be running 1 copy of Ice Wall because Ice Wall is one of the best defensive option cards that we possibly have to be working with. So it has the nice main ability where all of your opponent's Digimon gain when attacking lose 2 memory until the end of their next turn, so it's taxing all of the opponent's attacks, so that way it's de-incentivizing them from, actually attacking, otherwise they're going to be losing memory, and that could possibly ruin a lot of their turn on what they're trying to do. Then its security ability is also pretty decent, where we get to gain 2 memory, so it's just trying to anti-tempo the opponent for us to have enough time to be able to line up our big Ulforce turn. Next, I'm going to be running 2 copies of Blue Memory Boost for some added consistency. So Blue Memory Boost lets us check the top 4 cards of our deck, and then add a blue Digimon among them into our hand, and the rest go to the bottom, with this card going into the battle area for us to use for its delay ability of gaining 2 memory for some extra tempo at a later turn. And then the last option of the deck is going to be 1 copy of Offense Plugin A. So Offense Plugin A is a really easy card for us to use. Yes, it is a red card, but we don't care about the fact that it's red because while we have a Tamer in play, we could use this card ignoring its color requirement. Then on top of that, the ability we're trying to gain out of this card is just more punch factor. So one of your Digimon gains security attack +1 until the end of the turn, so we pair this up with any of our level 5s to be able to easily put UlforceVeedramon at swinging for 3 checks multiple times, so even if they have lots of security, we could still deal lots of damage in response to try to make closing out games even easier. Then its security ability is actually pretty decent, helping with the consistency on trying to find our Tamers, where we could reveal the top 3 cards of our deck, add 1 Tamer from among them into our hand, then the rest go to the bottom, and this card goes into our hand to be able to use at a later turn. And speaking of our Tamers, next on to our Tamers, I'm going to be running 2 copies of Davis. So Davis is in the deck as that memory fixing Tamer, but if you really wanted to run any other blue memory fixing Tamer, then you could. I still just prefer Davis just because even though he doesn't suspend himself, he helps with the overall consistency where we get to reveal the top 3 cards of our deck, add a blue and green Digimon from among them into our hand, and then the rest go to the bottom. So at worst, he's just looking for our blue cards, helping again with the overall consistency of finding our parts and pieces. Next, I'm going to be running 3 copies of Sora and Joe. So we're using Sora and Joe not necessarily for the extra memory generation, although it helps because it's super easy to achieve, because when we start our turn, if the opponent has a Digimon with no Digivolution sources in it in play, which they easily could, then we get to gain 2 memory, and the more Sora and Joes that we have on our field, the more memory we could possibly gain, thus making a lot of our power play potential even easier and more impactful, just because we could have lots of memory to play around with. Then on top of that, what we're really running this card for is the fact that we actually can suspend this Tamer when our Ulforce is attacking, so that way he can unsuspend himself with their ability of during your turn, when one of your blue Digimon attacks, we get to suspend this Tamer to trash the bottom 2 Digivolution cards, which the trashing part isn't irrelevant, we just care more so for the suspending part. Next, I'm going to be running 2 copies of Taichi V-Tamer. So Taichi V-Tamer is another Tamer that wants to suspend himself, and that's the main drive of why we are playing this card. So he has the main ability where if you have a Digimon with a Veedramon in its name, then we get to suspend this Tamer to activate one of the following effects of either A, drawing a card, or B, giving one of our Digimon plus 1000 DP until the end of the turn. But we're mostly just utilizing Taichi V-Tamer for the fact that he's a cheap Tamer that could suspend himself. And this is a really good card to combo with Jellymon, just because the BT9 version of Jellymon, when we play Tamer, we get to draw a card, so we get to start cycling through our deck really quickly and really efficiently. And this is a good card to combo also with our level 4 Veedramon or level 5 Veedramon in case we need to push those out and aggress with those cards as well. And then the last Tamer of the deck is probably the most important one in the form of 3 copies of Kyoshiro. So what Kyoshiro is doing is he is the purpose on why we're even running Jellymons to begin with, because during your turn, when you attack with a Digimon that has a Jellymon in its Digivolution source, then we get to suspend this Tamer to give that Digimon jamming until the end of the turn. So this is what's allowing our Ulforce to gain jamming to be able to make his attacks as safe as we possibly can, while also being another blue Tamer to suspend himself for our UlforceVeedramon to be able to unsuspend himself. So that level of synergy is what's making him one of the best Tamers for the deck to use. But essentially, as far as the big game plan of the deck goes, we're just going to try to use our Jellymon as our desired level 3, so that way Kyoshiro can give Ulforce jamming. Our level 4s don't really matter as much in terms of the one that we use, which is why I'm using the tempo ones more often than not, to be able to go up into either of our level 5s, to be able to give our UlforceVeedramon Security Attack Plus when he's going to be swinging, and if we just have a couple of Tamers on our field, namely our Sora and Joe, Kyoshiro, and Davis, then he'll be able to easily check the opponent 6 times, and if we have memory left over, that's when we hybrid or Omnimon for the game in case we don't have enough Tamers on our field. And that's also kind of why offense plugin A is super handy, just because it just increases the overall damage output of what we could do in the deck to try to OTK the opponent. And then there's still just room for customization on the different type of tech and tools that you could use in the deck, depending on what you're looking to play and how you're looking to play it. So if you wanted to, you could run some of the Vmons that do interact with unsuspending them. So if you wanted to, you could run Vmon from BT2 just for some extra card draw, or you could run Vmon from EX1 for some extra memory. Then if you want a card to help dig out some of our other Digimon and go more Vmon and Dramon based, then we do have Dracomon as a good search tool to be able to try to find our cards with Dramon, which all of our Veedramons have Dramon in their name. And we even have some other really decent level 4s to try to customize our inheritable abilities if you wanted to. So I'm just going to be highlighting Veedramon 0 just because it's one of the easiest cards to use to try to interact and synergize with the fact that we want to draw cards and have lots of cards in our hand for some of our various other abilities. And if you want to swap out the promo Weregarurumon, then we do have 2 other really good Weregarurumons to play in his place for some budget options. So we do have the BT7 Weregarurumon that either helps us play a Tamer or is a cheap at level 5 to hard play, and the inheritable ability also helps us gain some memory when we're unsuspending our Digimon, which we could easily do because of our Tamers and how Ulforce just works in general. Or if you wanted to, we could run the EX1 version of Weregarurumon just for some extra card draw if we're digivolving up into him, and extra memory gain on his inheritable ability for us attacking and having lots of cards in our hand, which is something we're already trying to do anyway. Then we do have some really good alternative options that we could run. So if you want more stun and stall tactics, then we do have Howling Memory Boost just to try to strip and stun the opponent's Digimon down while being a memory boost to gain some extra tempo later on. And speaking of extra tempo, we could also just run Hammer Spark as a really good security threat and a card just to gain some extra tempo in case we need to try to make our plays as powerfully and efficiently as we possibly could. And the benefit for trying to run those types of cards is so that way we could easily line up either our hybrids or our plugins. So we do have High-Speed Plugin D. If you don't feel like running the Jellymon package, then this is an alternative way to be able to give our Digimon jamming and unblockable, which is a really powerful substitute or replacement. And then we do have a slew of different removal options in case you want to try to run some security threats to try to stop the opponent's OTK. So we do have cards like Cocytus Breath to try to anti-tempo and bounce the opponent's Digimon back to their hand. Then another plugin you could try to utilize is going to be Digivolution plugin, just because it just makes going into our Ulforce a little bit easier in case we don't have the proper memory to be able to do it, because we don't have our memory fixing Tamer set up, and they're trying to deny us memory off of our Sora and Joes. So this is just a good alternative way to be able to easily Digivolve up into our high-level Digimon. And then because we are an OTK-based deck, we do have a delicate plan that we could possibly splash into the deck to make our attacks onto the opponent's security as safe as we possibly can, outside of the fact that we're already giving him jamming. And the Tamer that allows us to do that is going to be Matt and Sora, so this is just another way for us to gain some extra resources, just because at worst we know we're going to be able to have a really sizable hand to gain memory, and if the opponent has lots of cards in their hand, then we'll still also be gaining extra memory that way to be able to make our plays as efficient as we possibly can. And even though it doesn't have the greatest of synergies with Ulforce, it is still part red to be able to utilize various other red options outside of a delicate plan if we really want to use those. Then some other Tamers that we could think about using is Rina, just because Rina is another card that could help with our consistency with our on-play effect, looking for V cards, and also helps with our DP boost in case we don't have jamming. And another memory fixing tamer that we could possibly run that might have some decent synergy is the BT9 version of Kyoshiro. We're already trying to draw lots of cards, so I don't necessarily think the ability is that useful compared to the consistency off of Davis, but it is just a good budget substitute that's still fitting on theme and on synergy with the deck, just because we're still already playing Jellymons, and he still has the potential of being able to suspend himself. But yeah, this is just my interpretation of a UlforceVeedramon deck in BT9. If you really wanted to play one, I don't necessarily think it's going to be hyper tier 1 meta competitive, but it is a fun and interesting deck to experiment nonetheless with, and I do really like what the Jellymon package is adding into Ulforce, and even without the Jellymon package, we still have the plugins and lots of ways for Blue to gain memory to be able to utilize the plugins to make our Ulforce as strong as we possibly could. It's just we can't necessarily search for our plugins, which is why the Jellymon package is more desirable, because we can search for our Tamers and we can search for our Digimon. But to the fact that the Jellymon package could just be included to make our lower level Digimon even more aggressive is also very, very appealing, which is kind of why we're using Veedramon, because we could line him up with a Jellymon underneath and Koshiro on our field to be able to give 2 checks jamming as early as a level 4, but the intended purpose is for our Ulforce to gain that jamming off of our Tamer that way, while him being another good Tamer to suspend himself, and lots of additional ways to draw and gain Security Attack Plus to try to punch the opponent's security multiple times as hard as we possibly can with some really good game finishers. All culminating in a new and exciting way to be able to utilize our UlforceVeedramon based on all of the new tech and tools that he's been given over time. So that's all I really have for this video. As always, feel free to tell me your thoughts down in the comments below, and down in the description below are a couple of different ways you could support me and the channel. So I do have a TCG Player affiliate link, so when you use that link to buy cards off of TCG Player, then some of that money will go to supporting me and the channel. I also do make and sell playmats over on Overcard Gamers on Facebook, so when you buy a playmat with my design, then some of that money will also go to help supporting me and the channel. And on top of all of that, I do have a Twitch account over on twitch.tv/Zenitsu, so giving me a follow and a subscription also helps support me there, and I do play Digimon on top of various other games on that platform as well. So thank you everyone for watching, and as always, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more content, and I'll see you in the next video.